The service station clerk at the Flying J off Interstate 40 near Flagstaff thought she recognized the young woman standing at the counter. Not from yesterday or last week, but from somewhere deeper in memory. A photograph maybe, or a news bulletin that had circulated years ago when things like that still meant something. The woman was asking about a missing person, her voice steady but threaded with exhaustion. She placed a folded newspaper clipping on the counter between them, dated June 1989, showing two identical faces beneath the headline, "Twin Sisters, 19, Missing After Camping Trip in Coconino County." The clerk's hand froze above the register. The face in the photograph matched the woman standing before her perfectly, but there was something else. The woman was asking about the other girl in the picture. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy deep, real-world investigations. It was March 1995. Detective Raymond Cortez received the call at the Coconino County Sheriff's Office just after dawn. A patrol officer reported that a young woman had walked into the Flagstaff substation claiming to be Sarah Brennan, one of the twin sisters who had vanished without trace 6 years earlier during what was supposed to be a routine camping trip in the Kaibab National Forest. The case had gone cold in 1990 after 14 months of intensive search operations yielded nothing but a backpack, a single hiking boot, and questions that multiplied faster than answers. Cortez pulled the original case file from archives that morning, the manila folders brittle and coffee-stained. Inside were witness statements, topographic maps marked with search grids, Polaroids of the campsite where the twins' tent had been found partially collapsed, and dozens of handwritten field notes documenting coordinate sweeps, canine deployments, and helicopter reconnaissance flights. The sisters, Sarah and Rebecca Brennan, had been 19 years old, University of Arizona students on spring break, experienced hikers familiar with the backcountry. Their disappearance had defied every logical explanation. No signs of struggle, no ransom demands, no bodies, just absence. Now one of them had returned, but which one? And where had she been? The interview room at the Flagstaff substation was painted institutional beige, lit by fluorescent tubes that buzzed faintly overhead. Cortez sat across from the young woman, a tape recorder spinning between them, the reels turning in slow, mechanical rhythm. She wore a flannel jacket over a faded t-shirt, jeans worn thin at the knees, boots caked with red Arizona dirt. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, dark brown threaded with premature gray. She looked older than 25, much older. "State your name for the record," Cortez said, keeping his voice neutral. "Sarah Brennan. Date of birth: April 7th, 1970. The math checked out. Cortez opened the case file and slid a photograph across the table. The twins at age 17, arms around each other's shoulders, identical smiles. "Which one are you in this picture?" She studied it for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Left." Cortez made a note. "Tell me what happened in June 1989. Sarah's hands were folded on the table, fingers interlaced. She spoke slowly, choosing each word with visible care. "Rebecca and I drove up from Tucson. We'd planned the trip for months, 3 days in the Kaibab, hiking the North Rim trails. We set up camp off Forest Road 610, about 2 miles from the main trailhead. First night was fine. We had dinner, watched the stars. Second day we hiked to Crazy Jug Point. When we got back to camp that evening, there was someone there." Described them. "A man, 40s, maybe 50s. He said he was a ranger doing a permit check, except he wasn't wearing a uniform and his truck wasn't marked. Rebecca thought something was off. She told me to stay by the campfire while she walked over to talk to him." Sarah paused, her jaw tightening. "I never saw her again." Cortez leaned forward slightly. "What happened next?" "I waited for 20 minutes. Then I went looking for her. The man's truck was gone. Rebecca was gone. I searched the area, called her name until my voice gave out. By the time I decided to hike back to the main road for help, it was dark. I got turned around, lost the trail. When I finally found the campsite again the next morning, someone had been through our things. The tent was knocked over, my backpack was missing, and there was a note. A note, Sarah nodded, tucked inside Rebecca's sleeping bag. It said if I went to the authorities, they'd kill her. If I stayed quiet and waited, they'd contact me with instructions, so I waited. Cortez studied her face, searching for micro-expressions, inconsistencies, anything that would indicate deception. You waited 6 years. I didn't have a choice. Why come forward now? Sarah's eyes met his, steady and unblinking, because they never contacted me, and because I think I finally know where she is. The original investigation had been led by Special Agent Wallace Drummond of the FBI's Phoenix Field Office, who had treated the case as a suspected abduction rather than a wilderness accident. Cortez tracked him down through the Bureau's regional switchboard and reached him at his home in Scottsdale that afternoon. Drummond was retired now, but his memory of the Brennan case was sharp. "We ran every angle," Drummond said over the phone line, static crackling faintly in the background. "Interviewed everyone who'd been in that forest that week, checked every ranger station, every backcountry permit. We deployed search teams across 12 square miles, found the backpack on day 4, Sarah's, based on the contents. Found the boot on day 9, about half a mile from the campsite, wedged between 2 rocks in a dry creek bed. Sent both to the lab in Quantico. No blood, no sign of trauma. But here's the thing. We never found evidence of a third party. No tire tracks that didn't match hikers or forestry vehicles. No witnesses who saw a man matching Sarah's description of the supposed ranger. She claims she was told to stay quiet, or her sister would be killed." Drummond exhaled slowly. "Then why didn't she report the note? We would have brought in negotiators, set up surveillance. If someone really took Rebecca and wanted leverage, they'd have made demands. But there was nothing, no ransom calls, no proof of life requests. Just silence." Cortez glanced at the case file spread across his desk. "What was your working theory?" "Honestly, I thought both girls were dead, caught in a flash flood or fell into a sinkhole. The terrain out there is unforgiving. People vanish all the time and we never find them. But the families needed closure, so we kept searching. Eventually the case went cold. Now you're telling me one of them just walked in off the street." "That's what I'm telling you. Then you've got 2 possibilities. Either she's been held somewhere for 6 years and managed to escape, which means there's an offender still active, or she's lying and there's something else going on here." Cortez thanked him and hung up. He sat in the silence of his office, listening to the hum of the air conditioning unit rattling in the window. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. He picked up the phone again and dialed the University of Arizona Registrar's office. It took 3 transfers and 20 minutes on hold, but eventually he confirmed that Sarah and Rebecca Brennan had been enrolled as sophomores in the spring of 1989, both majoring in geology. Neither had completed that semester. He drove to the Brennan family home in Tempe that evening. The house was a single-story ranch with a gravel yard and a carport shaded by a mesquite tree. Sarah's father, Tom Brennan, answered the door. He was in his 60s now, graying and stooped, wearing a plaid shirt untucked over khaki pants. When Cortez explained why he was there, Tom's face went pale. "Sarah's alive? She's at the Flagstaff substation. Says she's been in hiding because someone threatened Rebecca's life if she went to authorities." Tom gripped the doorframe for support. "We thought they were both dead. After the first year with no news, we held a memorial service. My wife passed 2 years ago. She never stopped looking. I need to ask you some questions about the twins, Were they close? Inseparable. Born 8 minutes apart. Sarah was older, always more protective. Rebecca was the adventurous one, the risk-taker. They balanced each other out. Any conflicts, arguments before the trip? Tom shook his head slowly. Nothing unusual. They were excited about the camping trip. Talked about it for weeks. Cortez handed him a card with the substation's number. If you want to see your daughter, call this line, but I need to verify her identity first. Do you have anything from when the girls were young? Medical records, fingerprints? We gave all that to the FBI back in '89, but I might have their dental records. Hold on. Tom disappeared into the house and returned with a cardboard box labeled Sarah and Rebecca. Inside were school photos, report cards, and a folder containing dental x-rays from a clinic in Tempe, dated 1987. Cortez thanked him and drove back to Flagstaff with the box on the passenger seat. Would you have made the same call if you'd been in their place? The dental comparison took 2 days. Dr. Linda Vasquez, the county medical examiner, studied the x-rays under magnification in her lab while Cortez waited. She compared the 1987 images with a fresh set taken from the woman claiming to be Sarah. The match was definitive. Whoever was sitting in the interview room, her dental records aligned perfectly with Sarah Brennan's juvenile file. She's who she says she is, Vasquez confirmed, removing her glasses. No question. But identity was only the first verification. Cortez needed to understand where Sarah had been and why she'd stayed hidden for 6 years. He resumed the interview on day 3, this time with FBI involvement. Drummond had come out of retirement temporarily as a consultant, and he sat beside Cortez as Sarah recounted her story in greater detail. After I found the note, I panicked, Sarah said, her voice flat with exhaustion. I didn't know if Rebecca was already dead or if someone was watching me, so I left the forest on foot, hitched a ride to Flagstaff, and kept moving. I worked under the table, cleaning jobs, kitchen work, used fake names, stayed off any official records. Where? Drummond asked. Albuquerque for a year, Denver after that, then Salt Lake City, Portland, back to Phoenix last year. I kept moving because I was afraid they'd find me. Who's they? I don't know, that's the problem. I never saw a face clearly. The man at our campsite wore sunglasses and a hat pulled low, but I remembered something he said to Rebecca when she approached him. He called her by name. He knew who we were. Cortez exchanged a glance with Drummond. You never mentioned that in your earlier statement. I've been trying to piece together everything I remember. It comes in fragments. But recently, I started thinking about why someone would target us specifically. 2 geology students camping in a remote area. What if they thought we'd found something? Found what? Sarah reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a photocopy of a topographic map with annotations in faded pencil. This is a copy I made from Rebecca's field notes before the trip. She was obsessed with mineral deposits in the Kaibab, thought she'd identified a potential uranium site based on geological surveys from the 70s. She wanted to verify it, take samples. I didn't think much of it at the time, but what if someone else knew? What if they didn't want us documenting anything? Drummond studied the map. The annotations marked a location roughly 3 miles northwest of where the twins had camped, near an area labeled Paris-Awampits Canyon. You think Rebecca was taken because of this? I think she stumbled onto something someone wanted kept quiet, and I think if I go back there, I might find evidence of what happened to her. Cortez leaned back in his chair. We're not authorizing a civilian search. If there's credible evidence to support your theory, we'll organize a formal operation. I've been quiet for 6 years. I did what they told me, and it got me nowhere. I'm not waiting anymore. Cortez submitted a formal request to reopen the Brennan case, and within a week, the The Coconino County Sheriff's Office coordinated with the FBI and Forest Service to conduct a targeted search of Parissawampits Canyon. The operation launched on a clear morning in late March, with 8 personnel, including 2 search and rescue specialists, a canine unit, and a geologist from the Arizona Geological Survey named Dr. Marcus Hale. Sarah insisted on joining. Cortez allowed it under strict supervision. She rode in the lead vehicle, a Forest Service truck that ground along the fire roads at walking speed, suspension creaking over ruts and washouts. The convoy stopped at a trailhead marked by a weathered wooden sign, and the team assembled in a clearing surrounded by ponderosa pines. The air smelled of resin and old snow. Dr. Hale consulted Rebecca's annotated map and cross-referenced it with USGS survey data from 1974. If she was right about the uranium deposits, this area would have been flagged during the Cold War for potential extraction. But nothing was ever developed here. Too remote, too unstable geologically. Most of these sites were abandoned decades ago. Abandoned how? Cortez asked. Sealed mine shafts, collapsed exploration tunnels. The Forest Service declared them hazardous in the 80s and posted warnings, but there's no comprehensive database of every shaft. Some were never properly documented. The team spread out in a line formation and began moving northwest, following compass bearings and topographic features. Sarah walked beside Cortez, her eyes scanning the terrain with practiced intensity. After 2 hours, they descended into a shallow canyon where the ground changed from pine duff to exposed limestone, shot through with red mineral stains. The canine unit, a German shepherd named Saber, alerted near the base of a rock outcropping. His handler, Deputy Tim Larson, called the team over. Partially hidden by brush and fallen timber was an opening in the rock face, roughly 4 feet wide, descending at a steep angle into darkness. A rusted chain-link fence had once blocked the entrance, but someone had cut through it, leaving twisted metal peeled back like a wound. Cortez approached cautiously and aimed his flashlight into the shaft. The beam revealed a tunnel sloping downward into earth and stone, the walls shored up with rotting timber supports. The air that wafted up was cold and tasted of minerals. "Sarah," Cortez said quietly, "stay back." But she was already beside him, staring into the darkness. This is it. This is what she found. Dr. Hale examined the rock around the entrance with a magnifying loupe. Definite uranium traces in the surrounding stone. This was an exploratory mine, probably from the 50s. Someone's been inside recently. Look at the cut marks on that fence. Those are fresh, maybe a few years old. Cortez radioed for additional support and rope equipment. While they waited, he documented the site with a Polaroid camera, taking overlapping shots of the entrance, the cut fence, and the surrounding terrain. Each photograph was time-stamped and logged in a field notebook. He marked the GPS coordinates. No, wait, it was 1995. He recorded the location using triangulation from known landmarks and compass bearings, cross-referencing with the topographic map. When the equipment arrived, Cortez and Larson prepared to enter the shaft. They secured climbing ropes to a pine tree anchoring system, tested the stability, and descended into the tunnel with headlamps and hand tools. The temperature dropped immediately. The shaft angled downward for 30 feet before leveling into a narrow gallery. The timber supports here were nearly rotted through, and the ceiling showed signs of previous collapse. 20 feet into the gallery, Larson's light caught something wedged between rocks along the left wall. A jacket, faded denim, torn along one sleeve, dusty with mineral residue, but unmistakably real. Cortez photographed it in place before carefully extracting it. In the inside pocket was a student ID card from the University of Arizona, laminated and intact. The photograph showed a young woman with dark hair and a bright smile. Rebecca Brennan. The discovery of Rebecca's jacket triggered a full-scale forensic response. The mineshaft was designated a crime scene, and the FBI's evidence response team arrived from Phoenix with portable lighting, evidence collection kits, and ground-penetrating radar equipment. The team spent 3 days systematically processing the tunnel, documenting every square meter with photographs, sketches, and written observations. What they found painted a grim picture. Deeper in the gallery, beyond where the jacket had been discovered, the tunnel branched into 2 smaller passages. The right passage ended in a collapse, the ceiling caved in and impassable. But the left passage continued another 50 feet before opening into a small chamber roughly 10 feet across. Here, the air was stagnant and heavy. The floor was littered with debris. Broken glass, rusted tin cans, fragments of clothing, and bones. The remains were incomplete, scattered by rodent activity and time, but the skull and major skeletal components were present. The forensic anthropologist, Dr. Ellen Cho, conducted a preliminary examination on site. Female, late teens to early 20s based on dental development and bone fusion. Can't confirm identity without further lab work, but the biological profile is consistent. Cortez stood at the chamber entrance while the team worked, his headlamp casting shadows that danced across the rough stone walls. Beside the remains was a nylon day pack, moldy but intact. Inside were a water bottle, granola bars still in their wrappers, a folding knife, and a small spiral notebook with a waterproof cover. The notebook's pages were filled with handwritten field observations, geological formations, mineral identification, sketch maps. The handwriting matched samples from Rebecca's university coursework. The final entry was dated June 16, 1989, 3 days after the twins had arrived at their campsite. It read, "Confirmed uranium traces in gallery walls. Deposits consistent with 1950s exploratory assessments. Will collect samples tomorrow. Someone watching the entrance today. Need to be careful." Below that, in different ink and shakier script, "Trapped. Entrance blocked. Air getting thin. If anyone finds this, tell Sarah I'm sorry." Cortez closed the notebook carefully and placed it in an evidence bag. He climbed back to the surface and found Sarah sitting on the tailgate of the Forest Service truck, staring at the trees. He told her what they'd found. She didn't cry. She simply nodded, her face set in an expression of exhausted resignation. Did she suffer? I don't know yet, but we'll find out. The skeletal remains were transported to the medical examiner's office in Flagstaff for formal analysis. Dr. Vasquez performed the examination over 2 days, assisted by Dr. Cho. The findings confirmed the worst. The remains belonged to a young adult female, matching Rebecca Brennan's age and physical profile. Dental records provided final identification. Cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation due to oxygen deprivation in an enclosed space. There were no signs of trauma, no defensive wounds. Rebecca had died slowly in the darkness, unable to escape. The evidence suggested she had entered the mine voluntarily, likely to collect geological samples, and had been trapped when the entrance was deliberately blocked. The timeline matched Sarah's account. Someone had followed Rebecca into the shaft, sealed the entrance with debris and stones, and left her to die. The cut marks on the chain-link fence indicated the killer had returned years later, possibly to verify the scene was undisturbed. But who? And why? The investigation shifted to identifying the man Sarah had described from the campsite. Cortez worked with FBI sketch artists to create a composite based on her fragmented memories. The result was a generic-looking male, middle-aged, wearing outdoor clothing and sunglasses. Not much to work with. But the detail about him knowing the twins' names suggested premeditation. Someone had known they would be there. Cortez revisited the original case files and found an interview transcript from July 1989 with a local named Dale Mercer, age 47, who worked as a contract surveyor for mining companies in the region. He had been questioned as a routine matter because his truck had been spotted near the Kaibab trailhead during the weekend the twins disappeared. He'd claimed he was conducting a private survey for a client and had no interaction with any campers. The FBI had cleared him after verifying his alibi. But something about the interview nagged at Cortez. He pulled Mercer's DMV records and found a current address in Page, Arizona. A background check revealed Mercer had worked extensively in uranium exploration during the 1970s and 1980s, mostly for small independent operations that had folded during the market collapse. He now worked as a land consultant. Cortez drove to Page with Deputy Larson. They found Mercer at a small office in a strip mall, a single room with file cabinets and topographic maps pinned to the walls. Mercer was in his early 60s now, weathered and lean, with the wary demeanor of someone who'd spent decades working alone in remote places. "Detective Cortez, Coconino County. We're following up on the Brennan case from '89. Mercer's expression didn't change. "I already talked to the FBI back then, told them everything I knew, which was nothing. We've reopened the case. One of the sisters has been found alive. The other was discovered dead in an abandoned mine shaft near Paris-Sawampits Canyon." Now Mercer's face tightened. "That area's been closed for years. Hazardous terrain." "We know. Someone blocked the entrance while Rebecca Brennan was inside. You were in that area the same weekend she disappeared." "I was working a survey. Had nothing to do with any missing girls." Cortez set a folder on the desk. Inside was the photocopy of Rebecca's annotated map. She was investigating uranium deposits. Same deposits you were surveying. That's not a coincidence. Mercer stared at the map for a long moment. Then he sat down heavily in his desk chair. "All right. Yeah. I saw them, the twins. They were poking around areas I'd been hired to evaluate. My client didn't want anyone documenting mineral deposits that hadn't been officially declared. There were claims involved, potential litigation. I was told to discourage curiosity." "Discourage how?" "I approached them at their campsite, told them they were trespassing on private survey land and needed to leave. One of them, the more talkative one, argued, said it was national forest, public land. I tried to intimidate them, make them think they'd stumbled into something bigger than it was. Thought they'd pack up and leave. But they didn't." Mercer shook his head. "The next day I came back to check if they'd cleared out. Only found one girl at the camp. She said her sister had gone hiking. I left before things got complicated. Figured they'd be gone by nightfall." "Did you see Rebecca near the mine shaft?" "No." "Did you block the entrance?" "Hell no. I'm not a killer. I was paid to run interference, that's all." Cortez studied him, searching for cracks in the story. "Who was your client?" Mercer hesitated. "Mining outfit out of Salt Lake. Small operation called Red Rock Resources. But they dissolved in '91. You're not going to find anyone to corroborate this." Larson made notes while Cortez continued pressing. "Did you tell anyone else about the twins?" "I reported back to my supervisor at Red Rock. Told him there were geology students sniffing around the survey area. He said he'd handle it." "Name?" "Lyle Pritchard. But good luck tracking him down. Last I heard, he was somewhere in Nevada." They left Mercer's office with a lead but no solid evidence. Back at the station, Cortez contacted the Utah Business Registry and confirmed Red Rock Resources had been dissolved in 1991, its assets liquidated. Lyle Pritchard had no current address on file, no active phone listing. He'd disappeared into the transient world of small-time resource extraction, a ghost among countless others. But Cortez wasn't ready to give up. He requested archives from the Bureau of Land Management and the Arizona State Mine Inspector's Office, searching for any documentation of Red Rock's activities in the Kaibab during 1989. After a week of paperwork and phone calls, he received a packet of photocopied permits and survey maps. Buried in the documents was a notation referencing a partnership between Red Rock Resources and a second entity, a private holding company based in Phoenix called Vanguard Holdings. The name meant nothing to Cortez, but when he ran it through corporate databases, he found something interesting. Vanguard Holdings had been quietly active in Arizona mineral rights acquisition throughout the 1980s, acquiring claims, conducting surveys, and occasionally lobbying against new wilderness protections that would restrict future extraction. The company's registered agent was listed as a lawyer named Gerald Archer. Cortez knew that name. Archer had been involved in a separate federal investigation during the early 90s regarding fraudulent mining claims on public land. He'd been indicted but never convicted, the case collapsing due to procedural issues. Archer was retired now, living in Tucson. Cortez made the drive south. He found Archer in a gated community, a sprawling hacienda-style house with a courtyard fountain and manicured gardens. Archer was in his 70s, white-haired and sharp-eyed, suspicious the moment Cortez introduced himself. "I'm not answering questions without a lawyer present. I'm not here to arrest you. I need information about Red Rock Resources and Vanguard Holdings." Archer's expression flickered. "Ancient history." "Not for the Brennan family. Rebecca Brennan died in one of the mine shafts your companies were surveying." That stopped him. Archer stood in his doorway, silent, calculating. Finally, he stepped aside. "Come in." They sat in a sunlit living room lined with bookshelves and Native American art. Archer poured himself a whiskey, didn't offer one to Cortez. "Vanguard was a speculative venture. We identified sites with potential mineral value and secured claims before larger companies moved in. Red Rock was one of our contractors. When the uranium market bottomed out in the late 80s, we folded everything." "What about the Kaibab sites?" "We had survey rights, never developed anything. The deposits weren't economically viable." "But you didn't want anyone documenting them." Archer took a slow sip. "Public disclosure of mineral deposits complicates land claims. If word got out that an area had uranium potential, environmental groups would push for wilderness designation, locking everything down. We preferred to keep things quiet until we decided whether to pursue development. So when Lyle Pritchard reported that 2 geology students were mapping your survey area, you told him to stop them." "I told him to make sure they understood the area was under active claim. That's all." "Did you go to the site yourself?" "No." "Did Pritchard?" Archer set his glass down, carefully. "I don't know what Lyle did after I spoke with him. He was a contractor, not an employee. If he made decisions in the field, that was on him." Cortez leaned forward. "Rebecca Brennan was trapped in a mine shaft and left to die. Someone blocked that entrance deliberately. If Pritchard acted on your instructions, that makes you an accessory." "I never instructed anyone to harm those girls." "But you created the conditions for it to happen." Archer's face hardened. "You have no proof, and even if you did, the statute of limitations on most charges has expired. I'm an old man with lawyers who'll tear apart any case you try to build." Cortez stood. "We'll see." The legal case against Gerald Archer was difficult to construct. The statute of limitations on negligent homicide had expired, and proving direct involvement in Rebecca's death required evidence connecting him to the scene. But Cortez had one final avenue: finding Lyle Pritchard. The search took another month. Cortez contacted former colleagues of Pritchard's, mining companies he'd worked for, anyone who might have a current lead. Eventually, a tip came through from a retired surveyor in Elko, Nevada, who said Pritchard had been living in a trailer park outside Reno. Cortez coordinated with the Washoe County Sheriff's Office and drove to Nevada. Pritchard was found in a battered Airstream, surrounded by stacks of old survey maps and equipment. He was gaunt, grey, his hands shaking as he opened the door. When Cortez identified himself and explained why he was there, Pritchard's face collapsed. "I knew this would come back," he said quietly. They sat inside the cramped trailer while Pritchard talked. He confirmed Mercer's account. He'd been hired by Red Rock to secure the Kaibab survey sites and had been told to prevent interference. When Mercer reported the twins, Pritchard had driven to the area himself to assess the situation. "I found the younger one, Rebecca, inside the mine shaft. She was taking samples, photographing the walls. I told her she was trespassing, that the area was dangerous. She argued, said it was public land. We had words." "What happened next?" Pritchard's voice dropped to a whisper. "She threatened to report everything. The unauthorized surveys, the claims on federal land. She said she had enough documentation to bring in the Forest Service and the BLM. I panicked. I told her if she went public, it would ruin people's livelihoods, including mine. She didn't care, so I left. Walked out of that tunnel and back to my truck. And then I sat there for an hour trying to decide what to do. I thought about what Archer had said, that we couldn't afford exposure. I thought about losing my contract, my income. I thought about all the wrong things, so I went back to the mine entrance and started piling rocks and debris across the opening. Made it look like a natural collapse. Then I drove away. You left her to die." Pritchard nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I told myself she'd find another way out, that there were other passages. But I knew what I was doing." Cortez felt a cold weight settle in his chest. "Did you go back?" "Years later, 93, I think. I wanted to see if anyone had found her. Cut through the fence, checked the shaft. Everything was still sealed. I left it that way." "Why didn't you come forward?" "Because I'm a coward." Cortez arrested Lyle Pritchard on charges of second-degree murder. The extradition back to Arizona took 2 weeks, and the case went to trial in Flagstaff 6 months later. The prosecution presented Rebecca's notebook, the timeline of events, and Pritchard's full confession. The defense argued diminished capacity and lack of premeditation, but the jury deliberated for less than a day. Pritchard was convicted and sentenced to 25 years in state prison. Gerald Archer was never charged. The evidence linking him directly to Rebecca's death was circumstantial, and his legal team successfully argued that Pritchard had acted independently. But the trial brought public attention to Vanguard Holdings' practices, and the company's reputation was destroyed. Archer spent his final years in quiet disgrace. Sarah Brennan attended every day of the trial. She sat in the front row, silent and composed, listening to the details of her sister's death with a stillness that unnerved even the attorneys. When the verdict was read, she showed no visible reaction. Afterward, outside the courthouse, Cortez asked her how she was holding up. "I spent 6 years believing I could still find her alive," Sarah said. "Now I know I was wrong, but at least I know." "What will you do now?" "I don't know. Go back to school, maybe. Finish what we started." She left Flagstaff a week after the sentencing, returning to Tucson to rebuild a life that had been suspended in 1989. Cortez never saw her again, but he heard she eventually completed her degree in geology and went to work for the USGS, mapping mineral deposits across the Southwest. She never married, never spoke publicly about the case. She simply moved forward. The mine shaft where Rebecca died was permanently sealed by the Forest Service, the entrance filled with concrete and marked with a bronze plaque that read, "In memory of Rebecca Brennan, 1970-1989. The site became a quiet landmark for hikers who knew the story, a reminder of how quickly the wilderness could turn from sanctuary to tomb. For Cortez, the case remained a defining moment in his career. It had taken 6 years to resolve, but in the end, the resolution came not from luck or coincidence, but from persistence, from following the evidence wherever it led, and from the quiet courage of a woman who refused to stop searching. What would you have done differently? If you appreciate real investigations like this one, subscribe and stay curious.